Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
I saw this quote. I love it. It says, "Motivation runs out, discipline lasts forever."
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gents. It's another episode of Wrestling Changed My Life. This is your host, Ryan Warner. I will say that I'm still in San Diego for this work event, and so forgive the background noise. My guest today is the great Gabe Dean, two-time national champ for Cornell, and he never finished lower than third at the NCAAs, which is unreal. And his freshman year, he had a marquee win against Ed Ruth, which kind of put him on the national scene, and from there, the rest is history. Now he's an assistant coach, and this is an outstanding conversation. I really, really enjoyed it, and I know you will as well. Two quick announcements. The first is our online store, our merch, if you will, is going to be going live in the next week or two. We're building the Shopify store as we speak. We're going to have all kinds of cool things. Hoodies, T-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, you name it. And the second is, it's Fan of the Week time. And this one goes to Cannon Store. He's a wrestler for the Michigan Wolverines, NCAA qualifier. Thank you for tuning in, my friend. Tell Coach Bourmet he's the man. And that's it. Let's give it up for Gabe Dean. Gabe Dean, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Outstanding. It's 7 a.m. in Chicago, and there's snow on the ground right now, man.
It's here, man. It's crazy. I think it goes faster and faster every year. So
Seriously. You're from Michigan, so you know what those long winters are like.
Yeah, unfortunately I do. But you know what? I always say, I've always want snow on Christmas morning when I wake up, but pretty much after that, I'm good. It can go away. So,
dude, Ithaca, they got to have a lot of snow out there, though, I'm guessing.
We get a bad rap, but at the same time, it's not really any different than where I grew up in West Michigan. So I'm like, if you're from the Midwest or you're from the East Coast, obviously, I don't think it's that bad. It's when the kids from California, get out here and they experience it for the first time, and they look at it like it's like alien type powder, when they first see it. So it's actually been kind of funny a couple times with California guys on my team.
Dude, what did Travis Lee think when he got out there?
If I was old enough to tell you what he thought, I would.
That's a shocking change.
Yeah, no, but he's a little bit before my time. All I've heard about Travis Lee is that he was just the baddest dude, in terms of just the toughest guy ever. So I'm sure he was okay, but I'm sure anybody from the West Coast, the couple times I've experienced it, have been blown away by it. It's been fun.
Yeah, that's my first memory of Cornell wrestling is Travis Lee. I remember watching him, and I must have been in middle school when he won, and I was like, man, that's so cool. The guy went from Hawaii to New York, and that kind of put Cornell wrestling. Was he the first one to put them on the map?
Yeah, he's kind of the one that gets credit for putting Cornell as a brand, getting us on the map, and then kind of took off from there and just kind of steamrolled. Troy Nickerson and Jordan Lean and Dake and Bozak and Simons, and he started having all these national champs and All-Americans. And but it's just crazy that kid from Hawaii, you know, he's talk about not knowing what snow's like, you know.
Seriously.
And Hawaii, and so it's he was the first one to get it rolling. I know Coach Cole had a national champion. Coach Cole's first national champion was David Hirsch, Dr. Hirsch, who back in 1994. But Travis Lee was kind of the first one to like really pop the brand right out there and get things rolling.
Yeah, of the new era. And you know, long before all that happened, you were growing up in Western Michigan. Your dad was a D1 coach and, you know, former runner-up at Minnesota. Just take us back to your childhood, man. Where did it all start for you, and what was it like growing up in a household where your dad was a big-time college wrestling coach?
So we, you know, I was born in East Lansing, where Michigan State. He coached at Michigan State. He accepted an assistant coaching position at Michigan State. He was making $7,000 a year. We lived in married housing, and he was delivering tacos and working at a factory on the side so that me and my mom could eat. I was not planned. I came at the wrong time, from what I've been told. So, you know, they made it through, and you know, I grew up in the wrestling environment. You know, the guys I looked up to were wrestlers, and they were the Michigan State guys, and you know, they were so great to me. Growing up in a wrestling room is a pretty neat experience. You know, I see these little guys now. You know, Coach Gray just had a son, and you know, Kyle Dake just had a baby girl, and you know, I see these little guys, and they're coming up and they're crawling around on the mats, or they're, you know, Declan, Coach Gray's son, can run now, and it's kind of how me and my brother started. And you know, when we were growing up, like I said, the guys were the guys that we looked up to, and I just remember stories like, I remember when I got to be like 6, 7 years old, I really wanted a dog, but my mom wouldn't let me get a dog. She told me, you know, yeah, if you can pay for it, you can get it. And sure enough, the guys got a hold of that information on the team, and they started like, you know, giving me $1, you know, they'd like, you know, I'd just save it, you know, and eventually I had enough money to buy a puppy, and my mom was like, oh my gosh, but you know, she honored her word, and then I got a dog. So I, you know, and then they took me on the bus trips. My dad would bring me on the trips, and then he'd bring my brother too after, you know, he was old enough. And I remember I always wanted to look like my dad. My dad wore a suit when you go on these trips, so I had a little suit that I wore with a little clip-on tie, and I'd get on these trips. Well, my dad would speak, and I was like, "Well, that's really cool. Like, I should say something too." So I guess from what I've heard is after he would speak, I'd say, "Hey, I have something to say." So I would address the team, you know, before we got on the road, and you know, just stuff like that, where you look back now and you're like, you know, those are really precious memories. And you know, I learned a lot. I learned how to play euchre. You know, I learned how to play card games. Yeah, euchre and poker, and all that stuff on those bus trips. And I probably learned some stuff I shouldn't have learned too. So I, you know, being around a bunch of college guys, but you know, I see those guys now still. You know, I bump into Pat McNamara. You know, he brought his 2 little boys to one of my camps this summer. You know, I see Arson Alexander. You know, I see some of these guys, and it just blows me away. And I know it blows them away because I remember I could barely walk, and it's just it's pretty neat.
That's a cool story about the speech afterwards. I mean, you can just imagine you're on the bus sucking a lot of weight as a college guy, and then the coach's son wants to give up and give a speech to kick off the road trip.
Wants to address the team, yeah. The little 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid wants to get up and address the team. I can't imagine what I was saying. I know I addressed one year at the banquet. At the banquet, I addressed I gave a speech at one of the banquets. I can't imagine what that content was like. I don't know if it had anything to do with wrestling or not, but you know, I just saw my dad do it, so
Man.
It was something I had to do.
I wonder where you were veering on that thing. You must have been all over the place.
Yeah. I don't think it was very structured. I don't think it was probably the most inspiring or anything like that. But I'm sure it got made everybody kind of laugh. So
for sure.
I hope it wasn't too bad.
So with that kind of background, I'm surprised you gravitated more towards football. And I know you had a really big high school career as a quarterback. So, like, when did you kind of move into football versus wrestling as your main sport?
So, growing up on the wrestling side, my parents raised, call me biased, but my parents raised me and Max and my sister wonderfully. They, I see it a lot now where I'm at youth wrestling tournaments and I travel and I see some of the parents and I see, how much pressure they put on their kids to win. And, the true value of sports is not about winning and losing. It's about the lessons that we learn along the way, accountability, unselfishness, work ethic, all these different things that, make you into who you are. And sports really make you face those different character traits in yourself along the way because they provide that foundation of adversity. So when I see this, it makes me sad because there's so much ego and narcissism involved where they're missing out on the big point. So to my parents, credit, they always made it about whatever we wanted to do. And when I was a youth wrestler, and I don't know if you've heard the story, I'm sure you have, but like the first time I wrestled, I got like headlocked and pinned by a girl, and I acted like I was paralyzed on the mat. I was screaming. I was screaming. I couldn't feel my legs, and I was army crawling around the mat. My dad had to walk out of the gym, so he wouldn't make a scene because it's a very proud moment as a father. Believe it or not,
that's rock bottom as a dad. That's rock bottom. As
a
dad.
Yeah. And to his credit, a lot of dads probably grabbed their son and pick him up and take him out and beat him after that. But he just walked out, and my mom, when she told me the ambulance was coming, I could start to feel my legs again. Actually, the whole point of the story is like I overcame paralysis at age 9 to get to where I am now. But no, like that was a moment. That was a defining moment in our relationship. My dad always wanted to be my dad first. So when we were growing up, and like my youth wrestling career is nothing to brag about. I don't think I really even won anything until I got to about my 8th grade, 9th grade year. And even then, I went 0-2 at the Michigan State tournament. I got teched and beat out as a freshman, and I just always naturally, football just seemed like something I was always better at. When you're a kid, you gravitate towards the things that you're good at.
Were you all into wrestling though, or were you doing it because your dad was a coach and that was just like a fun thing to do?
I was doing it because it was something that was, I'm the firstborn. I'm the oldest, so I'm a huge pleaser.
Same.
And I knew that my dad loved wrestling. I wanted him to be proud of me. I wanted him to be happy. Not that, that's just the way a little kid thinks. Not that if I would have quit or if I would have done wrestling, he would have been proud of me and loved me. And not that I would have changed.
Right.
But in my mind, it was something that, my dad was a great wrestler, and, this is something that I'm going to do. But I was also, like, going to be the next Brett Favre when I was growing up. So I was like, wrestling will help me become a better football player. It'll make me tougher. So so when I got into high school, and I had the freshman year in wrestling that I did, I barely made the varsity team. We had a pretty good varsity team. My dad was the head coach. But right before that, we had moved to a town called Lowell from the east, when I was going into 6th grade, because my dad's brother, my uncle, was the head football coach and had built a really successful program on this at this small town in Michigan. It's a 3,500 person town, but we'd have on average 8,000 to 12,000 people at a Friday night game every night. And so my dad saw this unique opportunity where he's like, because we all love football. Me and Max both played football growing up, so he's like, you guys can play football, for your uncle in a really successful program and chase after state championships, and you can wrestle, under me, and I can build the wrestling program at this school. And it already had a pretty good wrestling program, but I can build a wrestling program at the school, and you guys can grow up, doing what you love in a great environment. And the public school was good educational wise too. So when we got over to the west side of Michigan, I was in 6th grade, Max was in 3rd grade. We grew up in the system, but again, I just never had the success in wrestling. Like I just wasn't as good. And like I said, when you're young, you gravitate towards things you're good at. Wrestling became this thing that was making me a better football player. I shared it with my brother and my dad. It was like kind of our little thing that we all did together. Mm-hmm. And I obviously wanted to make my father proud and happy. So when I got in my freshman year and I go into the state tournament and just, wrestling's just not working out for me that well, I started to really push myself towards the football side. And that's kind of why I thought I was going to be a football player, obviously, until I became a senior. But that's kind of how football started.
Dream. That's a dream situation, though, man. You're the top athlete at a school where everything revolves around sports. Your uncle's the coach. Your dad's the wrestling coach. I mean, that had to be like a dream place to grow up and go to high school.
Yeah, it was a little surreal. I see like the TV show like Friday Night Lights, and I saw the movie too, and I'm just kind of like, it's not as cheesy and dramatic as some of the things they're making it in this movie, but at the same time, it was kind of like that. Our town lived and breathed football, and then by the time I got to high school, my dad had actually done a wonderful job of building the wrestling program. My freshman year, our team won a state title in wrestling, and I was on the team. I wasn't a huge contributing factor, but I was on the team. And, sold out gyms and sold out stadiums, growing up as a kid. I mean, that's a pretty neat experience. So I was very blessed to be a part of that and be around some really special young men that, I learned from and had great effect on me.
What's funny you say that, if you've grown up in a small town like you and I have, you definitely want your kids to do that. Just because the experience is so special. I mean, we never locked our doors. Everyone knew who we were. It was a really communal thing. But now in my 30s, I don't know if I'd want to live there. I like the big city of Chicago, but eventually everyone has this like nostalgia of going back there, because if you've grown up in that kind of environment where sports are king, and it doesn't matter if it's basketball or wrestling, if you're good, they're going to come, and that's what it was like. Sounds like what it was like for you.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
What's interesting is at a certain point in your high school career, you kind of stepped out of this bubble, if you will. You get down to Georgia Tech, and things take a turn. Can you walk us through that story?
Yeah. So my sophomore year, I'll rewind a little bit before then, just so I can kind of lay the foundation for this. My sophomore year, I was going to play JV football. I was a quarterback, and we're in practice, and we're doing a scrimmage. We're a week out from the first game. We're playing this team called Detroit Mumford, who is really big, scary team from the Detroit side. A lot of great athletes, not very organized, but a lot of good athletes. And we're playing this team, and we had a senior that was a really talented quarterback. That was the starting quarterback on the varsity team. And he breaks his collarbone. He gets hit out of bounds and he breaks his collarbone. So all of a sudden, I was a starting quarterback for game one against this team called Detroit Mumford. Well, my town, if you don't, like I said, it kind of lives and breathes football. If you don't do well, people come rioting outside your house, or at least in my mind, So I'm a 15-year-old. I'm 15 years old at the time. I am playing with the seniors and these guys. Some of them going on to play college football. Some of them, I'm petrified. And but we ended up. They were so good to me, and this is part of the things that you learn along the way. Like the leaders on that team. Even now, I try to emulate some of the things that I learned from some of these guys. I was this young kid. They could have kicked me to the curb. They could have lost all their faith in me. And you know what? They brought me up, and they built me up, and they gave me the confidence we went on a run, and we ended up winning the state title that year. By the time that the senior quarterback had recovered, we were just grooving. So, you know, we only lost one game, 13-1, won a state title, and we just kind of were rolling. And then the next year, we made the state championship game, and we only lost like 2 games that year. So, my high school football career, I lost a combined total of 5 games. But after that junior year, I had made 2 state finals appearances. My junior year, I had all these football accolades. You know, I was kind of one of the few faces of football in the state of Michigan. And Georgia Tech gave me a call, invited me down to a combine down there. So me and my dad piled into a 15-passenger church van. Don't ask me why. He bought this church van to haul wrestlers around. With no AC, in the middle of July, we drive down to Georgia Tech for this combine, which is like 13, 14, 15-hour drive from Grand Rapids to Atlanta. I couldn't tell you how exactly long it is, but it's long. And I was there for about 20 minutes. Right when I walked in the head coach's office, I knew that they were like, "Oh, this kid." Like, I knew right away. There was so much negativity that came right when he saw me.
How so? So, like, you get there, you're thinking, "Hey, this is not the only chance, but this is a solid chance to get in front of some D1 coaches." And like, what was your expectation going into it? That you'd spend a couple days there?
They called me. They invited me down. They wanted to sit down and talk to me. They wanted to put me through a couple drills. And right when I walked in, I could see that excitement kind of just drain right out of them. You know, it was like right when I walked in, they realized that I was 5'10". You know, they realized that I wasn't that big, and you know, I wasn't built like your typical football player. And you could literally just see the excitement among him and a couple of his assistants just drain right out of him.
But how could they not know that ahead of time? Didn't they look at the stuff, the details? It's like,
yeah.
The guy's 5'10".
They watch film. They watch film and everything. Maybe they were wishful thinking, or read a couple of newspapers that listed me at 6 foot. You know, because that happened.
Oh yeah.
You know, but I don't know. But you know, I was 17 at the time. Even at 17 years old, I could tell immediately.
So what they say though, so you get there, you can tell, and then you go on and work out.
They put me through 2 drills, and then they were like, okay, you know, you know, thanks for coming, Gabe, but you know, they said, this is what they said: thanks for coming, Gabe. It's not personal. You're just not what we thought you were.
Heavy.
Pretty humbling experience. Yeah, pretty humbling experience. 17-year-old kid had dreams of playing football at the next level, and climbing back in that 15-passenger beat-up church van with your dad. I remember climbing back in, and I sat there for about 2 minutes. And my dad's he's not quiet, but he's the kind of guy that lets you come to him first, and then he starts to help you through things. So I was sitting there for like 2 minutes, and I kind of just was like, you know what, screw this sport. I'm not going to be told whether I'm going to be great or not based upon my physical appearance. No one's going to control my destiny. I need to be accountable for everything that happens in my life. Whether I fail or I succeed, I want to be the one that's accountable to it. I don't want to rely on anybody else. And I was like, well, that's great. Now I'm going to wrestle, because in wrestling, that's exactly what you get to do. And so I looked at my dad, and I was like, hey, Dad, I want to wrestle in college. Now, when I said that, keep in mind, I just won my first state title in Michigan, which is 4 divisions. I barely won. I wasn't nationally ranked. I wasn't that great of a high school wrestler, comparatively to these kids now that are just insanely good.
Were you like a Fargo All-American or anything like that?
I never went to Fargo one time.
Okay.
I never wrestled in really any off-season tournaments. I played football during the springs and summers, and I just wrestled during the wrestling season. I maybe went to a couple tournaments here and there in the off-season, but I was doing 7-on-7s, working on my quarterback skills. I was, like I said, I was going to be, in my mind, I was going to be the next Brett Favre. And that moment changed everything. It was a life-changing moment, looking back on it now. Because of where we've come, to this point. So,
but at that time, were you getting looks from other D1 programs, or was that really the only one in terms of football?
Oh, I had some walk-on things from some, Michigan State was kind of like, yeah, we prefer to walk on, which kind of pissed me off, and then Michigan had visited, but nothing really came from that, and then, Central Michigan and Eastern Michigan, so some smaller D1 programs in the Michigan area. A lot of D2 and D3 programs were pretty interested.
Sure.
Dayton, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio was kind of interested, but nothing huge. And then the Georgia Tech thing just kind of sealed the deal for me.
Man, isn't that crazy though? It's like something completely out of your control can, to your point, totally diminish where you go. I mean, maybe you could have gone on as like a cornerback or something, but like God knows what would have happened. And so you're in this van, really humbling moment. And you've got to be like the town hero at this point, right? You're the quarterback of the state championship team, and so that had to be exciting for your dad because now you're gonna get really deep into what he did because he got second in the country for Minnesota, way back before they were a power. And so, what I found interesting about the story was that even though you won high school state as a junior, when you doubled down and went into wrestling, you didn't win as a senior. Is that right?
That's true. I lost in the state finals my senior year to this kid named Jordan Thomas. He ended up, going to Michigan and didn't work out for him. I think he got 2 years in and it just didn't work out for him. But yeah, I lost to him.
And then how'd you end up at Cornell? Because that's a pretty far drive.
Yeah. So. The wrestling recruiting process was interesting as well because, like I said, I wasn't a blue chip recruit. Minnesota recruited me, but they pretty much recruited me because my dad, and his history there.
Yep.
Michigan State recruited me, but that was also because of my dad, because of his history there as a coach. Michigan wanted me to be a preferred walk-on, and I had a couple other schools reached out to me, like letter-wise, maybe a call. But the biggest school that showed the most interest, that put in the most time, not that really mattered, but that just connected with my family, and connected with me the most by far, was Cornell. Now, they figured out about me. My dad was down at the National Coaches Convention that they hold down in Florida every year. My dad's pretty heavily involved in the wrestling world still. He runs a company called New Way, and New Way is this huge governing national organization that runs all these big youth wrestling tournaments everywhere. And he was down there. It's a great networking event for anybody that's involved with the sport. And Rob Cole was there, speaking on the fundraising side for the coaches convention. They have him down every year, and he's kind of a legend in our sport in terms of what he's been able to do here. And if you've ever met Rob Cole, you never forget meeting Rob Cole. So he was there, and he bumped into my dad, and then they wrestled around the same time. Rob wrestled for North Carolina, my dad wrestled for Minnesota, as you said, and Rob was like, so, I heard your boy, you got a couple sons. I heard your oldest is going to play football, because it was kind of known, I guess. And my dad was like, no, actually, he just decided he wanted to wrestle. And Coach Cole was like, give me his number. And he called me 2 seconds after they had that conversation. They came to do a home visit with my family, him and Damian Hahn. They just blew it out of the water. They were amazing. They were funny. They were genuine. They were enthusiastic. They just were it seemed like an amazing place. And then when I went out on my official visit, I literally walked off a football field on Friday night, got in the back of my dad's car with my mom and my shoulder pads and everything, and we drove out to Ithaca, and I had my official visit there, and I walked in on Sunday morning right before I went back to Michigan and walked into Coach Cole's office and was like, this is where I'm coming to school. So,
Man.
I didn't know, what I was getting myself into in terms of, I knew it was a national powerhouse. I knew this place was an amazing place, and I was looking around, and the facility is beautiful, and the campus is breathtaking. I don't know if you've ever been to Ithaca.
No.
Everybody thinks New York, and it's New York City. It sits up on this hill, overlooks this one of the Finger Lakes region. It's unbelievable. It's the most beautiful college campus I've ever been on. And then the education and the wrestling experience together, all the opportunity that brought. My dad always told us since we were young that, you want to go to the place that's going to provide you the most opportunities in your life. And there was an easy answer. I was kind of interested in Michigan because they have a great education, and they had, the wrestling and all the intangibles were there, intangibles. But, we got the meeting on Sunday morning, and the head coach at the time was like, and rightfully so, the kid that I lost to in the state finals was going there.
Yeah.
Was like, hey, we got the number 1 recruiting class in the country. We'd like Gabe to walk on here. And it wasn't like a slap in the face. We totally understood it. But, if I'm going to walk out of Michigan and pay, or Cornell ended up being cheaper financial aid-wise, because we don't do athletic scholarships in the Ivy League.
Oh, you
and
don't?
Then I fell in love with. No, we don't do athletic scholarships in the Ivy League.
Wow. I knew you could redshirt, but yeah.
It's all financial aid. It's all need-based. It's all based on your parents' income.
Okay.
So, so when I got here, the team and the coaches and the school and just everything, it was just like no brainer. I walked in on Sunday, walked right into Coach Cole's office, and I'm like, this is where I'm coming to school. And it's been history ever since.
That drive back on Sunday, you must have been just daydreaming about what it's going to be like to wrestle at Cornell. And so you end up getting there, and you take the gray shirt your first year there. And for people who don't know what that means, is since you can't redshirt in the Ivy League, you essentially you live in Ithaca, but you can't work out with the Cornell team. Are you taking classes as well?
Yeah, so we pretty much do a gap year. We train in the Olympic Training Center here, and then we take a couple courses at the community college about 15 minutes away.
Okay. That has to be a pretty lonely year, though, because you're not really involved with the team or with the school. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but what was that like to go do that so young?
You would think that just on paper, but I had a bunch of kids doing that with me.
Okay.
Pretty much all of our incoming guys are doing that with me. And we have a system here. It's like kind of like taking a prep year. You go to like Blair or Wyoming Sun and you do a prep year. Well, we have that same system in place, but you're training in the regional training center with the Olympic level athletes, like Drake and Donnie and all these guys. And at the time it was Cam Simez and Kyle and Bozak. And you're also going, of course, to the community college, getting some credits out of the way to transfer in. And then, Cam Simez had just graduated college, and he, they hired him to be the coach for our group of guys. We had about 8-9 guys at the time. It was one of the best recruiting classes in the country that I was coming in with. Actually, I was one of our worst recruits on paper.
Who were some of the guys in that class?
Mark Gray, Brian Robuto, Dylan Palacio, Steve Congini, Alex Cisneros,
Wow.
Taylor Simez, there was just, it was an abundance of talent. Angelo Silvestro, another Illinois kid,
Oh, yeah.
he was in that class. So, I was one of the worst recruits in our class by far, and it was intimidating when I first got there for sure. But the guys at Cornell, if you've ever been around our team, you ever been around our culture, it's very family oriented. the guys are friendly. They all come up to you, even if they don't know who you are. They want you to feel comfortable. That's kind of what that's what was instilled in the program, and now I'm on the coaching side. That's what we continue to try to instill in our guys. Great leadership always, and it was just they bring me in like family. So it was a little scary when I first got there, but because I was around all these great wrestlers, and Cam Simons was our coach, who was someone I really looked up to. He's a Michigan guy, national champ, 4-time All-American at Cornell. But there were just a lot of amazing role models around.
Dude, was Dylan Palacio as crazy as he is now? And I mean crazy in the best possible way. I just watched a video of him
I know.
in a man thong in Venice Beach wrestling some dude.
I know. So I get asked this question a lot because me and Dylan we went through the whole thing together. We went from beginning to end. He's nutty, but he. I will say this about him: when you get him, you sit down in person with him and you're talking to him. One, he's extremely intelligent, and two, he's very personable. I know he seems like this crazy dude when he's running around doing these videos and that kind of thing. Which he'll probably end up being famous. I wouldn't surprise me one bit. But he's also just a really, when you're sitting there with him in person, he's a really nice kid, and he means well.
No, I'm sure. And I used to, before I knew about any of the social media stuff, I distinctly remember his interviews when he made the finals about how like his self-belief and his visualization. And if anyone listens to this podcast, they know I'm obsessed with people's like mental routines and their mental reps and that kind of thing. And he was like kind of the first guy to really openly talk about that I can remember from that era. And so I just, that stuck in my mind. And yeah, man, he's someone I'm fascinated with.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. Not a bad person. If you get him on your podcast one day, I'm sure you'd have a really interesting conversation. So, absolutely.
So he's there when you get there. This class of really solid guys is there, and then you kind of have this humbling experience early on at I don't want to say at the lowly Buffalo Open, but like it's not like a Premier Open tournament. It's not like the Midlands or something. Like
that. We can be honest here. It's a terrible tournament.
So you go to So you've pretty much been dedicating yourself to wrestling for about a year and a couple months at this time. You get to this unbelievable school, one of the top programs in the country for sure. You got Damian Hahn, who's this like larger than life guy, just a stud of an athlete. Cam Simez, and then you get to the Buffalo Open and you go 0-2. That had to be a big turning point for you as well, kind of like the Georgia Tech thing.
Yeah. So went to the Buffalo Open. And I go on to, and leading up to this point, I've just been getting my butt kicked by Cam Simons. Seemed like every day. I think it was mostly every day. Congeni got hurt towards ACL a couple weeks in, so I was the only big guy in the room. And Brian Robuto was small at the time. He wasn't a 74-pounder. He was a 57-pounder. And I was just taking the absolute worst beatings of my life from him. He throw me into the bleachers and, in the cardio bikes. And he was choking me. I remember one time I was so tired of cameras with this really high pace, and he was known for it, legendary for it. I was so tired. I'm laying down on a mat, and I don't even feel like I could move. And I steal my shirt, and my shirt was off at this point, as well as my sock and one of my shoes, because the ankle picked me so many times that my sock and shoe came off. But I'm laying there. I feel my shirt come around my neck, and all of a sudden I'm choking. So I start freaking out. I jump up, and I'm like, "Cam, what the hell? Why did you do that?" And, he started choking me, and he's like, "See, you still have energy." And it's just like sick mind games like that. But he was right. I mean, I thought I was dead, and then all of a sudden my life was being threatened, and I found the energy in me. But it was just that. And we go to the first college open, and I go 0-2, and I'm like, this is the first time I really had to confront, as a young man, what my purpose was going to be in my life. Which I've come to find out your purpose changes over time. But as the first time I really had to confront that, because I was like, this is pointless. I'm getting my butt kicked. I'm not even winning. So I called my dad, and Dad, I'm going to walk on the football team at Cornell. This isn't for me. And he said something. It sticks with me to this day, and I can't ever get it out of my head, especially when I'm in my low moments. And he said, "Son, I got a question for you." And I said, "Yeah, what is that, Dad?" And he's like, "Why do you wrestle? Why are you doing this?" And I couldn't give him an answer right away. I couldn't give him a clear answer. And really in that moment, I realized that I wasn't attacking my life purposefully. I was working pretty hard, and I was always a good kid. I knew to get good grades. I knew to go to practice. I wasn't late or anything, and I didn't party, and that's not kind of how that's just. I wasn't into any of that, and but I wasn't attacking every day with a purpose, and that was the first time I had to confront that in my life. And once I figured that out, it changed who I was. It changed the amount of work I put in, my attention to detail, my resilience, because I always knew why I was doing what I was doing at that point. Even if I wasn't, I didn't win an Open my first year. I mean, I wrestled 74 matches my first year in college, and it's mostly because I lose first or second round in a tournament. And I'm talking like the Millersville Open, the Binghamton Open, like these Opens, rinky-dink tournaments that we all went around to and wrestled in. And I'd wrestle 8 matches there because I lose first, second round, and I wrestle all the way back and take fifth. I'd lose first, second round, wrestle all the way back and take, third. But I never won a tournament. But I think with that foundation and that clarity, as I continue to improve my skill, set me up to that following year when I came to Cornell to have a pretty successful freshman campaign.
To say the least, man. To say the least. But I love the clarity of purpose and that whole concept, because everyone knows what the right thing is to do, but we're confronted with these little situations throughout the day. Should I have a kale shake or should I, have a protein shake, right? When you should be having your greens, or like there's all these little points throughout the day where you could do one thing versus the other. And even though you know what the right thing is, unless you know your why and it's really clear, it's kind of hard to make the right decision sometimes.
It is. It is. And it's that, life is pretty simple. It's not a complicated thing. Us as humans, we just make it complicated. And we make it complicated because there's so many different distractions that the world provides that try to pull us away from, our values, our character traits, our purpose, and all these things that make up who we are. That continue every day. Every day, they're gonna pull at you, and you have to have something deeper and bigger within you that keeps you disciplined to, your value system, the kind of person you are, and the kind of man you choose to be. And that was the first time in my life that I really had to confront that, because I grew up in a pretty middle class, upper class family. I never had anything that I didn't need, or I never had to really, I learned a lot of lessons from sports as a young man through my years up to that point. But it's the first time I was out on my own. I was going home to my bedroom every night, and it was just me. Mom wasn't cooking dinners anymore. Dad wasn't there to put his arm around me in the tough times. And I had to really figure out, what kind of man I was going to be. And it was the first big step in that direction.
Well, it's like the guy at the Buffalo Open doesn't care who your mom or your dad is. Like, you're just another kid out there, and you got to kind of make it on your own. But what I love is that you just dug in, man. I mean, 70-some matches as a redshirt freshman, that is unbelievable. I mean, I've never heard of someone wrestling that many matches in college before. Is that normal for the Cornell guys?
No, it's not. They just, luckily we've been having some better recruits than I was that ended up actually winning these things and making long runs instead of, wrestling 8 matches in a day because they lose first, second round and have to wrestle all the way back. So And then Cam took us to every tournament on the face of the earth, and we'd wrestle in it and compete in it. So it just my first year in college, I mean, it was a huge stepping stone, and there's been stepping stones along the way. It wasn't just like it just took that step, and then it's just been cruise control ever since. There's been some very prominent moments in my life from that point to now, and that was definitely like one of the first big ones, for sure.
What would you say the next one was?
It's probably after my freshman year. So the next one was, it's funny, like this is why I love sports, is like the losses and adversity that sports bring, they kind of provide us the opportunity to take those stepping stones. It's just a matter of taking the step itself where people get caught up in. But so after my first year in college, I took third in the country, and Jimmy Sheptak and Ed Ruth graduated, so I was coming back, and it was kind of like I'd won a national title, but I hadn't won a national title yet. And so I was the number one guy in the country, and all of a sudden, like I'm this guy that I had always worked to be, but I never knew if I'd ever get there. So I go to this Las Vegas Open tournament, and I lost 2 matches in the same day, and I was wrestling tight the whole tournament. And my whole sophomore year was kind of that way. I didn't really confront the issue until right after I was driving home for spring break. I was in my car. I was in the middle of Canada, I actually remember. And I'd actually found a way to win a national title my sophomore year. But I don't think I was clear. I think there's another big stepping stone for me. My freshman year, there's no expectation. When you're a freshman, you're just wrestling, and you're out there, and you're grinding, and, whether you win or lose, it doesn't matter. But then once you become this guy that's supposed to be all-world beater, nobody is going to touch him again in his college career, and you start to get caught up in an expectation rather than living to a standard than what society puts on you. Things go pretty south pretty quickly, and my whole sophomore year, like I said, I won a national title, but it was the longest, most stressful year of my life because I was living to the expectation of what society put on me, and I wasn't living to the standard which I held myself. And I just remember thinking when I was driving back, I was happy I won a national title. If you go back and watch my sophomore year in the national tournament, I won every match pretty much by 1 point. And I wrestled extremely tight. But I was driving back, and I just remember thinking, I don't care if I win another wrestling match in my life. I'm not doing it the way that I did it this past year. And I think that freed me up to just wrestle with a lot less fear. Remind myself that I hold myself to a standard and my purpose rather than living to what the expectations of what society put on me. Who cared about rankings? Who cared about, I was supposed to be this and I'm that and I'm this and I'm that. Doesn't matter. And my junior year flew by because I took another step into becoming the man that, I wanted to be. And thank God for wrestling because,
seriously,
it made me take those steps along the way.
Man, it's like it's just a trajectory of growth, and there's every time you think you've reached maybe a place where you can breathe a little bit, then you kind of come back your sophomore year, or your freshman year, and then you get pinned by Ed Ruth, and you beat Ed Ruth, and that's another level you've jumped, and then you get to the national tournament, you get third, and then as you said, you won as a sophomore, and then you kind of had this realization, and that was one thing I was really intrigued by because I love the details of preparation, and I'm obsessed with John. I say obsessed all the time, but I just follow all these guys who I think are fascinating, and John Wooden is one of them, and he was known for not even knowing sometimes what the score at the end of the game was because he knew that if they prepared the right way, it would take care of itself. So that seems like that was your mentality going into your junior and senior years.
It was, because that was something I could control. I was trying to find, when I was focused on what society brought, I was trying to find all this external motivation. and being the best guy in the country, and that's what fueled me, and the attention and the glory and all these kind of things that came with, that's what I was trying to fuel me, and I found that will run out. I saw this quote. I love it. It says, "Motivation runs out, discipline lasts forever." And that is 100% true. When you watch Rocky, after the movie, you're like, all right, I'm ready to run through a wall. I'm so fired up. But then the next day you wake up and that's worn off, and you still got to find a way how to run through that wall. And the way that you do has nothing to do with getting pumped up, listening to music and all these kind of different things. It's taking everything that's in your control, which is your preparation, like you said, and being completely disciplined to it. And that goes back to eliminating those distractions. Not eliminating, I'd say managing them, because they never go away. And when you take more pride in your discipline than you do even care about winning and losing, that's when you start to become a really dangerous athlete. Because one, you become fearless, because you stop worrying about winning and losing, and you're completely focused on the things that are in your control, your preparation, and the task at hand. When you become that guy, that's when you become extremely dangerous as an athlete, in my personal opinion. And that's exactly what was that step for me after my sophomore year. Was I don't care if I would win or lose a wrestling match again in my life, because this sucked. Like, I won a national title, but I don't feel like I can even enjoy it 100% like if I would have done it a different way. I'm going to be a guy that is disciplined to everything in his control, and I'm going to maximize that. Because at the end of the day, one of my biggest fears is living with regret. And I can live my life peacefully. I can go to bed peacefully at night if I know that I did everything in my control to put myself in a position to win. The things that keep me up at night are the things where I got caught up in all the BS that life brings, and it affected my preparation and things in my control. So that was the next piece for sure that made me a much more dangerous athlete than I was before.
I like that. I'll remember that discipline over motivation and taking more pride in that. It's exactly right, because anytime, I feel like we're in the era of motivation right now. There's all kinds of stuff out there, whether it's like a David Goggins type guy or whatever it is. There's, across social media, there's these little motivational boosts, and they do work for a short time, but that long-standing success, to be a two-time Division I national champ like you were, that takes an unreal level of discipline for a long, long time. And so that's definitely going to be something that sticks with me. And I know we're kind of winding down here, but I'd love just to talk a little bit on, what was, I guess, how did your purpose change once you became a coach? Because that had to be a pretty big jump from being just solely focused on preparing yourself versus now you're helping coach the Cornell team. So how did that shift for you? Your why?
Well, you asked the right questions, man. I'm impressed. I didn't know if we'd get into that part on this podcast, but you see it clearly. So that's a huge step. And that's a step where it gets really fuzzy and really actually tough for athletes that have had success, that have lived the way that I decided to live after my sophomore year, because you go right from living pretty selfishly, in my opinion, which is somewhat necessary to do in order to be successful, right? You have to be a little selfish, into a job that is completely selfless. And I really struggled with that my first year out. And keep in mind, my little brother, my younger brother, I shouldn't say little anymore, but my younger brother was coming into the same school, in the same weight class, and replacing me. And all the time I was his coach. And there's a whole other set of bag of things that brings when you coach your brother and you coach your family. And I was young, and I was an idiot, and my purpose had shifted from that selfishness. And that first year, I was not the coach that I needed to be. I wasn't focused on completely taking myself and putting it into all these guys. I was still caught in my own little world. I just lost my third national title. Probably would have won the Hodge and all this stuff. And I still feel sorry for myself about all those things instead of really embracing this opportunity as a young coach. And that was this is the thing that has this is the biggest lesson that I learned in my life, and something that I'm going to take to my grave with me is what being going from an athlete to coach. And my brother really made me confront it in myself. After his freshman year, we sat at a coffee shop with Carstown Bagels, and I sat down with him, and I'm thinking, he just became an All-American. Life's pretty good, he's happy and everything. And he looked at me and said, "Gabe, I love you more than anything. You're my brother, someone I've looked up to. But you made this year a lot harder for me than it should have been." And I was like, whoa. First, I was really angry. I'm like, what do you mean? This year harder than it should have been. And then I realized he's right.
Did you have any idea, though, at this point in time? Or is this kind of like now where you're realizing, shit?
I think, I'm a smart enough guy to know that I made some mistakes, definitely made some mistakes. But I wasn't being accountable to him, made the mistakes, and I'm like, yeah, whatever,
Right.
I'm not an arrogant guy, but in my own little mind, I was still trying to feed off, Gabe Dean, the wrestler, and not transitioning into a more humble lifestyle, which is way better than Gabe Dean the wrestler, Gabe Dean the coach. And I realized in my life, my purpose that, like I said, now this purpose I'm taking with me to the grave, because I've seen what it's done for me and how it's affected my life in such a positive way. You take yourself, no matter what you're doing, when you get done and when you start your career. I don't care if you're an entrepreneur, you're an engineer, you're a wrestling coach, whatever you're doing. I think the key to happiness is living your life this way, and that is completely investing yourself into other people. I live my life now, and thanks to Max for helping me confront this in me, investing into others. And it's made me a much better person, a better man, a better boyfriend, a better son, a better brother. And it's really my life way more and it's really what defines happiness. We all have a choice to live selfishly or unselfishly. The happiest people in my life that I know live unselfishly. And that's because as they're completely investing themselves in other people, they create an environment, a very positive environment around them that just feeds back into them ultimately. And that's what I stick to every day I wake up. That's what I stick to. And it's something that's changed me for the better. It's changed who I am.
That's amazing because it's sometimes it's tough to let the machismo go down, let the ego go down, because then you feel like, man, like my identity as like this guy who is an alpha male wrestler who does everything right, like that's all gone now. And so that had to be an incredible transition to go through that.
Yeah, and, you attach your identity to things that don't matter at the end of the day. Because 30 years from now, there's going to be tons of Gabe Deans.